Hello, my beautiful buds. Welcome to my channel. My name is Joy, and if you'd like to talk about plants, you're in the right place. So I've been visiting a lot of big box stores lately, just curious about what plants that they had available, particularly because I've heard that Philodendron squamiferums have been releasing to some Lowe's, and that's kind of a big deal, at least in my opinion, because I really like squamiferums, and they have historically been a more commercially rare plant that has been quite expensive, and the price has been dropping lately, but there were some pretty thoroughly grown mature squamiferums that were dropping in different Lowe's around the country. I think particularly a lot of them were in North Carolina. I mean, I knew that it was a long shot, but I traveled around to all of my local big box stores just to see if maybe there were some squamiferums. Unfortunately, there were not, which I expected. If you expect disappointment, you'll never really be disappointed. While I was at these big box stores, I was thinking, you know, it would be really awesome to make a video about my favorite plants that are really easily accessible or relatively easily accessible. It would be great to talk about my favorite plants that you can find in big box stores like Walmart and Home Depot and Lowe's. Those are the most classic examples, but even at your local grocery stores, because there are honestly quite a few gems out there, and I wanted to take a moment to appreciate them. Now, just to discuss the parameters of this video, I only intend to talk about plants that, number one, I already own and have experience with, and number two, have personally seen at a big box store. Now, that does not necessarily mean that I purchased these specific plants at big box stores, because some of them I happened to find at nurseries and whatnot, but I have repeatedly seen them at big box stores. For some of them, depending on your area, you might need to hunt a little bit more, but that's kind of part of the fun of plant collecting, if you ask me. There's just a lot of excitement of visiting big box stores, you know, a few times a month just to see what they have, and sometimes they really surprise you. There are obviously some rarer plants that drop in big box stores in certain parts of the country. There's lots of Syngonium albos that have been dropping in California, I think. Some people find monstera perus, or like I said earlier, squamiferums. Let's see, what other plants have people seen? I don't know, there's a whole lot of them. I follow the subreddit that's called Plant Watch, so that's where I get a lot of this information. There are plant collectors all over the country that post when they spot a really cool plant or a rarer plant, maybe more uncommon, in their local stores and nurseries, and they just let everyone know, hey, in this area, this plant's here if you want to come nab them. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. I have a lot of plants to talk about. I'm gonna just go ahead and start it off with 4 different trailing philodendron that I absolutely adore, and I've seen all of them at big box stores. Now, obviously some of them are harder to come by than others, and I'm sure that you can probably guess what they are, but I'll just kind of go one by one. This first one is the Philodendron micans. Yes, yes, yes. Oh my goodness, I can never get over this plant. This has to be one of my favorite plants, but I'm also really bad at picking favorites, so you know, but she is an absolute beauty and she grows like a beast. I've had literally no problems with this plant. The only complicating factor, I guess, she did have a lot of older leaves that, you know, got kind of spotty and yellowed off and died off, but they were clearly old leaves, and she has tons of new growth coming in. So I'm really not that concerned at all. Yeah, as a whole, this plant has such nice velvety leaves. It is a very, very popular plant. I know lots of people covet it. For quite a while, they were a very hot plant that people had a really hard time finding, and they were really expensive. Even though you could find them in big box stores, people were just nabbing them up so quickly. But thankfully, nowadays, at least in my area and in my experience, I've seen a lot of micans at big box stores for pretty reasonable prices. For me, this pot was actually 2 plants that I combined. One of the plants was a 4-inch pot that, oh, I think it was like $18, somewhere between $18 and $20. And then the other plant that I put in this pot was actually, it was another 4-inch pot for, if I recall correctly, it was under $10. It was either under $10 or it was like $11, which from what I've seen based on other people talking about Mikan's prices, that's a pretty good price because it was a very, very full pot. And as you can see, I put them together and this is a very full 6-inch pot. So yeah, but I've also happened upon Mikan's in other areas. Those 2 Mikan's happened to be from local nurseries, but I have seen several Mikan's at my local Lowe's. So I feel like they're getting to be a little bit more accessible, but again, that depends on your area, I'm sure, and they might not always be accessible to everyone. Oh, it's delightful. I love the coloring. I love the burgundy that comes with it at times, especially if it gets more sun stressed. And I've had the greatest time with this plant so far. The next plant that I wanted to talk about was actually just the standard Philodendron hederaceum or Hartley philodendron that's green. It's honestly, I mean, it's the more plain version, but the way that it fills a space, it's just, the green is so deep and it's simple, but it's so beautiful. And this plant, I think I got like a full 6 or 8-inch pot from Home Depot. And I mean, one downside to getting plants from big box stores is that oftentimes the soil's riddled with fungus gnats or they struggle with root rot and the plants aren't always super well taken care of. So this was the case with this plant. And I did actually end up splitting it into 2 different pots because I wanted Philodendron hederaceum in 2 different areas in my home. And it took them a while to really get started, but once they acclimated to my home, they both have taken off. And he's not quite trailing yet in the way that I want him to be someday, you know, more like that Mikan's and some of these other philodendron that I'm gonna be talking about. But all of this is brand new growth. You can see this very fresh green color, and it's about to spill over the side of the pot, honestly, like any day now. So I'm very excited to see that happen. And it's such a beautiful plant. I know it's near and dear to many's hearts because, you know, this is a lot of people's very first plant because you can find it in a lot of places. It's very affordable, and if you don't have it, it's very much so worth finding. The next plant I want to talk about is the Philodendron Brazil, of course. And oh my word, this specific specimen of Philodendron Brazil is absolutely stunning. Do you see how mature these leaves are? And let's just take a moment to appreciate this. Okay, hang on. Okay, look at the coloring here. Look at how thick this stem is. And this leaf is actually kind of spiraling around, so I might have to try to help it out. I don't know what to do about that. Maybe add some more humidity or something, but just look at these peachy stems. And then look at the variegation on this guy. Oh my goodness. Like, Philodendron Brazil, man, is stunning. Oh my gosh. There's just chartreuse and creamy, yellowy variegation with, like, you know, almost white, but not quite. Lots of light green and dark green, and then the peachy stems. And let me tell you, wow, this plant, wow. So, okay, so this actually is not my original Philodendron Brazil, and actually I do have to clean it from some hard water stains. I just haven't quite gotten around to that yet. But this is not my original Philodendron Brazil, so if you guys watched my houseplant tour and you're like, how did your Philodendron Brazil get that big? No, that is not at all the case. He's definitely getting along nicely, but he is certainly nowhere near as mature as the other one. I got this plant pretty early on in my plant collecting journey. He was only like a 3-inch pot. He's now graduated to a 4-inch pot. He's very immature. And I got him from a nursery in Wisconsin. And I hadn't seen a Philodendron Brazil before because I was pretty early on in my plant collecting journey. So I nabbed him for like $13, which is way overpriced because I got this one recently for closer to like $8.99. And as you can see, it's a lot more mature. Now, obviously I still love this one, but they're different plants, and that's kind of the beauty of plant collecting. Sometimes from plant to plant, even within the same species, they're so different in their variegation and their maturity, and sometimes their growth habits, how thick the stems are, stuff like that. Now, the recent Philodendron Brazil that I purchased, I got from my local nursery, but I will say, since I bought this, oh, my hair is stuck. Thanks, Monstera. In the last several months, as I've been looking around at my local big box stores more frequently, you know, poking around, seeing what they have, I have seen Philodendron Brazil that are similar to this. Now, they might not be trailing quite as much, but there are some very full, beautiful, mature pots at Lowe's. And I mean, if I hadn't already nabbed this guy, I definitely would have nabbed one of those, because wow, when they have those large leaves and those thick peachy stems, honestly, what's so interesting is actually this one doesn't even have the peachy stems. I didn't even realize that. So I wonder if maybe it wasn't getting enough light, or it's not mature enough, or it's like a slightly different variety of Philodendron Brazil. Honestly, I'm not sure. So if you guys know, let me know, because I just noticed that. I wasn't sure what was striking me as so different between the two of them, but if you know, please let me know. Anyways, Philodendron Brazil, just look at her. Oh my gosh. So I'm sort of expecting the worst with Philodendron brantianum, I will admit, because I just have this giant moss pole right here. Okay, I guess I gotta do this. She's kind of heavy though, so bear with me. But I will say I'm a little bit nervous with my Philodendron brantianum, because I've heard that people have had issues with them, but I have her in a pretty high humidity environment, and I'm having her climbing up a moss pole. So I'm hoping that she'll stay happy with me, because my goodness, look at those leaves. I noticed the other day that they literally glitter. Excuse me? Plants do that? They glitter, apparently. So that's pretty awesome. I don't know if I can get you to see any of that, but the silvery foliage alone is enough to sell me on this plant, because I absolutely love silvery foliage. It is one of my favorite things. So we'll see how this plant goes. I've only had this plant for, I think, about a month or maybe 5 weeks or so. So I can't really speak to its long-term success, but at least in terms of plants, I got this one at Lowe's, and it was the only one there. So it is one that you might have to hunt for, but it is one of my favorite plants that I've ever gotten from a big box store specifically. So I had to mention it. Next, I'm going to talk about two scindapsis, or silver satin pothos, whatever you want to call them. Now this is the Scindapsis pictus argyrius. And wow, she is a stunner. No joke, she has to be one of my favorite plants in my collection. I know I feel like I say that about a lot of my plants, but this one is legitimate. She honestly may be needing a repot probably this spring, because I watered her very thoroughly like 2 days ago, and her leaves are already kind of curling again, which tells me that she's getting thirsty again. And yes, she's in terracotta, but she usually would dry out about every 6 days or so, and now she's starting to dry out like every 3 or 4 days in comparison. So that's a pretty substantial difference. And if she dries out and is thirsty after like a day and a half, that tells me she might be getting pretty cramped in here, might not have as much soil to work with, very well might be root bound. And excuse me again, I admire her so much. She's a massive trailer. And honestly, I know a lot of people really love Scindapsis, but a lot of people tend to sleep on the Scindapsis pictus argyrius a little bit, because it's the standard Scindapsis and it's a lot more common than some of the other ones that you'll find. But I see this almost every time I go to Lowe's. I see like a pretty decent pot of it. Now they're not quite as awesome as this. This has been growing in my home for quite some time now, but with time, they'll get there, and they're beautiful plants. I love this deep green. I love this silver speckling. Like I mentioned before, I love silver. So if you're into silver plants, this is a great gal for you. And while we're at it, talking about the silver foliage and scindapsis, this is my scindapsis Trubii Moonlight. I got this lady at Walmart, and I think it was sold as like a sterling silver plant from Costa Farms. In the last few months, I've seen dozens of them at Lowe's, and I've been so tempted to pick another one up because some of the pots that they're selling are even fuller than this pot, and it's been growing with me for a while. So I was tempted to get it. I try to not have too many duplicates in my collection, but there are some plants that I just can't get enough of. I want to see them everywhere. And like I said before, different plants, even if they're the same genus and the same species, different plants can, you know, kind of like people, every plant is pretty unique in its own way. At Lowe's, I can't remember how much this was at Walmart, but I know at Lowe's, I think it was like $19.98, which is an oddly specific price, but whatever, they can do what they want. A lot of people say it's a slow grower, and I think it kind of is, but I mean, it's very consistent, even though it's slow. Like, it always has new leaves going for me. You can see there's a new one right there, and these two leaves just finished unfurling, and you can tell by their lighter green color that they did that. And I did recently propagate this guy too. So there's a whole nother like leaf and a couple of nodes that I took off of them. But yeah, definitely a plant worth considering. Absolutely beautiful, even more gorgeous in person, I'm sure. Now this is a begonia maculata whitey. Now, admittedly, I actually have not personally seen the begonia maculata whitey in big box stores, but I kind of wanted to use her as a stand-in for any cane begonias, because I have seen begonia maculatas in Lowe's that are Costa Farm ones, but they're not the whitey with, you know, these dark leaves and red backs. Like, they just had green leaves and the same polka dot pattern, but this is actually a new leaf that is just coming in and like not even fully hardened off yet. And I just had a blast watching this leaf come in, and there's another one on its way too. But yeah, honestly, it was so cool because it's just this, it starts off like super tiny and like red or orangey, and then it emerges and just gets bigger and bigger and bigger every single day until it's like this. And it was so cool to watch. So I really enjoy cane begonia. I found that they are not extremely fussy plants so far. I try to keep them in relatively high humidity. Like, both the cane begonias that I own are close-ish to my humidifiers, and they do also get pretty good light. So I guess in that respect, you know, they're a little bit spoiled. But with that, I mean, they haven't gotten any pests yet for me, and you know, they seem relatively easygoing. They're growing even though we're in the dead of winter right now. And yeah, I see lots and lots of cane begonias at Lowe's and Walmart and Home Depot, and I always kind of want to pick one up. I haven't picked one up specifically from there yet, but honestly, one of these days I'm going to, because I think they're really cool plants. Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm running a marathon. I have so many plants. But I got really excited and I had a lot to show you guys. So I guess, okay, next one. So right here, of course, so it's nighttime. So this prayer plant is all perked up, as you can see. But this is the Maranta Leucanora Kirchoviana, I believe, but I usually just call it Maranta Green because that's what I purchased it as. This Maranta, as well as the red Maranta and most likely a lemon lime Maranta, although I feel like those are a little bit more difficult to come by, at least in my area and in my experience. I've come across them a couple times at my nursery, but they're riddled with spider mites, so I did not purchase them. And I do admit that is a pretty common problem with Marantas at big box stores, and you know, like my local nursery had that issue as well. Unfortunately, thankfully, I did notice that they pulled them off the shelves the next day because I think they realized it and were like, whoops. But anyway, you may have to wrestle with pests and the realities of that, because prayer plants in general, as I mentioned earlier, they do tend to be quite susceptible to pests, particularly spider mites. At least I've dealt with them and I've seen them in big box stores. So that is one thing to take into consideration, but if you're careful, if you check the undersides of the leaves for pests and you know what to look for, I think you can be pretty safe in buying one of these. I mean, it's not like all of them are going to be riddled with pests or anything, but I found marantas to be very rewarding. They grow very, very quickly for me, and they seem to be generally a little bit less picky than other prayer plants. They don't seem to need quite as much humidity to look pretty nice. And like I said, they grow very, very, very fast. At least in my home environment, they do. And I think that they're absolutely beautiful. Next up is actually a peace lily, and this is a domino peace lily, or it's one of the variegated peace lilies out there. So it will probably be a lot easier for you to find a non-variegated, like standard spathyphyllum peace lily, but I particularly prefer the domino peace lily, just because the little bits of variegation that it has and the texture to the leaves I think is super cool. Now, this is my first and only peace lily, and it's pretty small, so admittedly I don't have a ton of abundant experience with them, but this, you'll have to let me know if you have a leaf like this, because this leaf looks like it's a brand new leaf that just came in recently, and it looks mutant. It looks like a fishtail, and it has this beautiful line of variegation right in there as well. So you'll have to let me know if any of your peace lilies have done that, because I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, she's got lots and lots and lots of new leaves coming in all over the place. I don't know how well you can see that, but yeah, peace lilies have a reputation for being a very dramatic house plants. They let you know when they want to be watered, but then they perk right back up, and that has been my experience. And honestly, now that she's acclimated to my home, she's growing really, really quickly, and I'm eager to see what she looks like when she's all grown up. Okay, we're close to the finish line. This is my monstera adansonii. Now this one specifically, I actually got off of Plantarina, and yes, it is a large plant, although I do sort of regret getting it off of Plantarina. I hate to say it. I mean, to be fair, there was one of those deals going on that they commonly have, so I think I got a free plant with it. I think I got maybe a Hoya pubicalyx splash with it or something. I got it relatively early on in my plant journey, so I just didn't really have a good concept of how expensive or inexpensive plants were, or how common or uncommon plants were. And at the point when I purchased my monstera adansonii, I hadn't seen any of them like in my local nurseries or at big box stores, so I just kind of assumed that they were pretty uncommon or difficult to come by. And maybe that was the case at some point, but then pretty much like within weeks of me purchasing this guy, I went to Lowe's and I saw like a sea of monstera adansonii, and I was like, nice. Because off of Plantarina, they're kind of expensive. I mean, to be fair, they do have free shipping, but really the shipping is just included in the price. You know, and it was a really good, healthy plant. It's been growing a lot. As you can see, it has lots and lots of new growth. And I actually recently have taken several cuttings off of it too, so it was even fuller before this. But anyway, that's kind of a long tangent. Needless to say, you can find these guys at big box stores pretty easily. And let me just tell you, of all the plants in my home, and I have many, many plants, this one tends to get the most attention when guests walk in the door. They see this plant, and I have another monstera adansonii in the living room as well. There's two of them. They see both of them, they're like, oh, what is that plant? It has holes in it? Like, what? It's so cool. I've never seen anything like that before. And it's freaking awesome. And also, as a side note, so I don't know, when my guests exclaim and say that, I mean, sometimes I forget how cool this plant is and how much I first fell in love with it when I first like stumbled upon it online. But then I remember, you know what? This is a really cool plant and it deserves more love. So yeah, that's my monstera adansonii. And as a side note, if you've seen Spider-Man No Way Home, I mean, this isn't exactly a spoiler, but Happy, he has a monstera adansonii. I saw it in theater and I kind of squealed and I poked my husband. I was like, Clay, they have Happy owns a monstera adansonii. I don't know why I was so excited, but they showed it in like 2 different scenes. So like I kind of nerded out a little bit. So that's a fun fact. Now I can't really talk about plants that you find in big box stores without mentioning a pothos or epipremnum, so I decided to include my absolute favorite variety in this video, and it is my Angela pothos. I can't get over this plant. When I first started collecting pothos, I saw this plant online and I fixed my eyes upon it. I was like, that is the pothos that I want the most out of all of them. And I got them, and my opinion never changed. I still absolutely love this plant. It's honestly like my favorite kind of variegation. It has really cool marbling as well as some more sectoral types of variegation. So I just think it's absolutely stunning. I mean, you don't have to agree with me, but I personally think so. Half of this plant I got from Etsy, and the other half of it I actually got at Walmart after I purchased the Etsy plant, and I potted them together. And the plant that I found at Walmart was like a 3.5-inch pot for less than $5. And there were like 10 of them sitting there. So I honestly could have gotten several, but I decided to just get the one because I already have one at home, and then I potted them together. And I cannot wait for this gal to just start trailing, and I'd love to propagate a piece and get it started on a plank or a moss pole or something like that, just to see what they look like when they climb, because I don't know if I've really seen anyone do that. I'm sure someone has, but I haven't actually seen plant YouTubers that I've personally watched. I've never seen any of them do that, so I don't know. I'd love to see how it matures, because pothos usually fenestrate over time when they are maturing. So I don't know, I think that'd be super cool. And honestly, it might even kind of resemble a monstera albo, like if it starts fenestrating and getting super big leaves. So I'm gonna have to try it because I feel like that's a really good idea. Anyway, I think that's all I have to say. All right, last but absolutely certainly not least, this friend right here that has been sitting next to me this entire time. I cannot talk about getting plants at big box stores without talking about Monstera deliciosa. It is, honestly, you can disagree with me on this or maybe agree wholeheartedly, but I feel like the Monstera deliciosa is the most iconic houseplant there is. I mean, talking about guests and friends that come to my house, you know, they look around at my plants, and the one plant that they recognize is the monstera. They walk in, they're like, oh yeah, I've seen that around. That's like a Swiss cheese plant, right? Or, you know, they might know the name monstera, or they at least recognize it. They're like, oh, I really like this plant. They're really attracted to it. They gravitate towards it. It is a gorgeous and iconic plant. And I know we can get kind of caught up in the ties and the albos and the arias and all these really cool variations on the Monstera deliciosas, but we can't forget how awesome just plain green Monstera deliciosas are. I happen to own 3 of them, kind of accidentally, but they're so pretty. And most big box stores I go to, I mean, my Walmart always carries them. Are they always in the best of shape? Questionable sometimes, but recently I actually stopped by my Lowe's, and their monsteras were in really, really good shape. I was actually super impressed. They were pretty big plants, and they had fenestrations like this. They're pretty advanced fenestrations. So yeah, Monstera deliciosa, guys. They used to not be quite so easy to find. Based on my own experience, it took me a while. I had to hunt a little bit to find my first one, but then I started seeing them everywhere. Which, I mean, I guess that happens with plants. Maybe I just wasn't as good at noticing them. Maybe I was plant blind before, or maybe they really are getting a lot more popular and just you see them more often. Well, I think that is all. That was quite a bit of plants, so if you stuck with me this long, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I would actually love to hear about your experiences with houseplants in big box stores. Let me know down in the comments below your best big box store houseplant finds. I mean, I know I've certainly found quite a few gems. I think that's gonna be it for this video. So thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please feel free to like and subscribe for more planty content. But of course, no pressure. It's okay. I mean, if you stayed with me this long, I mean, I don't know. I hope that you have a wonderful and blessed day. Bye-bye.